Other mortals. In the beginning, I must be specific to make things clear. This Iceberg video will touch only Russian music and not the entire Eastern European scene. I'll not mention any Ukrainian or Belarusian music because I don't know much about it. I would like to tell about what's going on in the underground scene from my homeland. Obviously, I will not be able to mention every single Russian artist and genre. The main purpose of this video is to provide a map of the Russian underground music to the foreigners. To many Russians, I will not tell anything new, but foreign people will at least have a general understanding of the Russian underground. If you know any Russian or even Ukrainian or Belarusian music which is worth listening, you can mention it in the comments. I know that the Russian titles and names are a little difficult to comprehend for the foreigners, so I will just tell about some Russian artists and music, and I'll list all of that in the description with the links. This will make it easier. Now take a bar of dark chocolate and a cup of espresso, because it's time for you to learn about the Russian underground. Tip of the iceberg: Russian underground rap. Rap is the most popular music genre in the world, thus the most popular genre in Russia. It would be fair to begin with the Russian underground rap. When I was a teenager, I listened to a lot of rap music. It was the period between 2011 and 2017. I started my music career as a rapper, so I know the genre pretty well. Now I outgrown this genre, and most of the music that I liked as a teenager became absolutely unlistenable. I still want to talk about it because it's worth mentioning, at least briefly. One of the rap artists that I'm still listening to occasionally is the Chemodan Clan. In my opinion, in comparison with many other rappers, Chemodan isn't so bad because it reminds me a lot of industrial and dark ambient music. I like the dystopian atmosphere in their music. Chemodan resonated with me a lot in 2019 when I was extremely depressed. Their fourth album, GNOY, from 2011, is one of the most atmospheric rap albums that I've heard. People consider it their best. It is one of the most interesting albums in the Russian rap that made Chemodan very popular. The group was active between early 2000s and 2017, and during that period it didn't have many changes in their style. This is why, if you enjoyed GNOY, you can easily listen to everything else from their discography. One of the most significant underground rap artists in Russia is Babangida. He is one of the most mysterious Russian rappers because no one really knows who he is. There are only scraps of information regarding his biography and a few photos. Besides many songs that he recorded at his home, he released only one album, Макаревич, in 2012. This album is one of the most important releases in the Russian rap. For Babangida, it was definitely a step forward. Before this album, his lyrics were more cynical and the songs had a lo-fi quality. Don't take me wrong, it's not a bad thing, but on the album the sound quality increased and the lyrics became more mature and conscious. I also like the instrumental part of the album. It is way more melodic than everything else that he did before. After the album, Babangida became less active and completely quit rapping in 2013. Another 3 rap groups to check out are Kunteynir, Mutant, Hvlam and 2H Company. Basically, these 3 have a lot in common. They were amongst those rap groups in Russia who put emphasis not on the rhymes and technique but more on the absurd atmosphere in their songs. One of the rap artists who surprised me recently was Kopyushon Ноу Мо. I liked his music when I was a teenager, and not so long ago I decided to listen to him many years later. I listened to his 7th album, Комната, from 2015. This album is his opus magnum. It's one of the most depressive albums that I've ever heard. If you need some depressive music regardless of the genre, the album Комната welcomes you. Russian horrorcore. Discussing Russian underground rap without mentioning Russian horrorcore would be wrong. Horrorcore in general is an extremely niche genre. If horrorcore is like a town where everyone knows each other, Russian horrorcore is like a district in that town. That's how small Russian horrorcore scene is. Russian horrorcore started approximately in the late 2000s. Some of the significant Russian horrorcore artists are Hvlam, Naveh, Slivko, Braslet, Crucified Priest and Velial Squad. If you want to know more about Russian horrorcore, you can start from these albums. Hvlam, Глава, Шестая, Откровение from 2012, Slivko, Героин для Богов from 2018, Braslet, Rezня from 2012, Crucified Priest with Velial Squad from the Darkness from 2014. In 2021, Hvlam died from COVID-19. He was one of the most known Russian horrorcore artists, so this was a huge loss for the Russian horrorcore scene. The murder of Энди Картрайт. In July of 2020 in St. Petersburg happened one of the most brutal murders in rap. In July 29th, police found the dismembered remains of the Ukrainian-Russian rapper Энди Картрайт at his own apartment. His wife was arrested as the main suspect because she was the one who did it. The real reason of Kartrite's death is unknown. According to one of the versions, his wife murdered him during the domestic conflict. According to her, she found her husband dead after returning from the shop. There was the needle next to his body. She considered such kind of death indecent to her husband, thus she decided to butcher, hide him and announce later that he had vanished. Despite being responsible, she doesn't feel guilty about what she did. After the arrest, police found suspicious messages and notes in her phone that looked like she was planning to murder someone. While committing the crime, she dismembered her husband to 15 pieces. Some of them she destroyed, some she put into the fridge and the washing machine. In 2021, she was sentenced to the house arrest until the next trial. During the trial, she was accused of the murder and the desecration of the dead body. Энди Картрайт was never a popular rapper, but his cruel death became the sensation in Russia. Shallow Waters, Russian post-punk. Many people who are watching this video are well aware of the Russian post-punk. I'm sure at least one person knows such bands as Molchat Doma and Motorama. These guys are worldwide famous, although not everyone knows the veterans of the genre. Russian post-punk started in the 1980s. Some of the early bands were Zvuki Mu, Дурное влияние and Свидетельство о смерти. Also, some of the bands worth mentioning are Радикальный метод, Huga Uga and Plaksa. I'd recommend these Russian post-punk albums. Всем смертям назло from 2001 by Свидетельство о смерти, Неподвижность from 1989 by Дурное влияние and Заупокойное место по-живому from 1995 by Радикальный метод. In 2007, the band Huga Uga ended due to death of its leader Maxim Kotomtsev from the heart attack. In 2021, one of the veterans of the Russian post-punk, Pyotr Mamonov, died from COVID-19. He was the leader of the band Zvuki Mu and one of the most influential Russian post-punk musicians, and it's also a huge loss for the genre. Siberian Punk. Siberian Punk is criminally underrated worldwide. It started in the 1980s in USSR, where it was strictly censored. Artists were often arrested for playing it. The biggest figure in the Siberian Punk was Egor Letov and his band Гражданская оборона. Egor Letov was sent to the psychiatric clinic for playing the Siberian Punk. There he kept creating music just to survive mentally. After his release, he performed with one of his bands where he shouted to the audience to read Mein Kampf. USSR government obviously didn't like such kind of behavior and decided to arrest Letov again. But that time he could slip away and was hiding in Ukraine. By the end of the 1980s, the persecution ended and Letov was free. I'd recommend you to listen to the album by one of his side projects, Егор и опизденевшие, which is called Прыг-скок, that was released in the year 1990. It's a unique Siberian punk and psychedelic rock album that is definitely worthy of your attention. There were many bands in the subgenre, but here are some more of the most influential Siberian punk bands and artists. Инструкция по выживанию, Черный Лукич, Соломенные еноты, Янка Дягилева, The era of the Siberian Punk is long gone, just like many of the Siberian Punk musicians. Yegor Letov died in 2008 from the heart failure. Yanka Dyageleva committed suicide by drowning in 1991. 3 out of 5 members of Instrukция по выживанию are also dead. Their leader, Miroslav Nemirov, died from the kidney cancer in 2016. The causes of death of other 2 members, Evgeny Kuznetsov and Igor Gulyaev, are unknown. The leader of Черный Лукич, Vadim Kuzmin, died in 2012 from thromboembolism. Another member of Черный Лукич, who also worked with Yegor Letov in the various projects, Konstantin Ryabinov, aka Kuzewo, died in 2020. The cause of death is unknown. The leader of Соломенные еноты, Boris Usov, died in 2019 from the iliac artery aneurysm. I also would like to mention separately one more important Siberian punk band that I enjoy so fucking much, Orgasm Nostradamusa. If you like music similar to Gigi Allen, you definitely need to give Orgasm Nostradamusa a listen. The band leader, Alexei Fishev, is the Russian Gigi Allen. Though there was one thing that made him different from Gigi. Gigi Allen expressed a raw animalistic aggression, and Fishev was a poet for whom the philosophical aspect was very important. If you want to listen to Orgasm Nostradamusa, you better start from their first 2 albums. Восхождение к безумию from 1997 and Лихорадка неясного генеза from 1998. Orgasm Nostradamusa ended in 2003 when the guitarist Alexander Arkhipov and the frontman Alexei Fishev died. Arkhipov died from the poisoning by the unknown substance. Fishev died from the alcohol poisoning. The next bands are not included into any genres that were mentioned above. This is why I'll discuss them separately. Otto Dix. I'm not a huge fan of them, but their music is good, so I decided to add them as an example of the Russian dark wave. If you want to know more about the Russian dark wave, you can start your research from Otto Dix. Свиньи в космосе. If you enjoy post-hardcore and emo music as much as I do, then you'll definitely like Свиньи в космосе. If you like bands like Sunny Day Real Estate, Mineral, Thursday and Taking Back Sunday, Свиньи в космосе is your cup of tea. The band didn't exist for a long time and recorded only 1 album in 2005, Числа и дозы. This album is cool, you need to check it out. Театр Яда. This band is amazing and unique. Their style is hard to describe. Sometimes they played grunge, sometimes art rock, sometimes something else. Because of its very experimental style, it remained deeply in the underground. Театр Яда ended in 2012 due to death of its leader Yan Nikitin from the unknown cause. Kalavrat. This is going to be a little controversial because Kalavrat is the most infamous Russian neo-Nazi punk band. It was one of the earliest Russian bands who started playing such kind of music. It was founded in the 1990s during the rise of the skinhead subculture in Russia. In Russia, Kalavrat is illegal. Their songs are included in the list of the extremist materials. There were even cases when people got arrested for spreading their music through the internet. Chimera. It is one of those bands in the list that deserves its own review. It's impossible to put them in a specific genre. You need to listen to this band and see for yourself. Even if you go through their whole discography in the chronological order, you will not fathom their music. I would recommend you to start from their second and the final album, Zudva, from 1996. Chimera was literally one of a kind. Chimera was active during the 1990s and broke up in 1997 after the band leader Eduard Starkov hung himself in the February 23rd of 1997. He was 27 years old. Deep Waters. Russian Industrial. Russian Industrial is not just a subgenre, it's a lifestyle with its own aesthetics and philosophy. The influence of Russian mentality, history, culture and nature gave it its own aura. Russia is a peculiar place that combines paganism, Christianity, nationalism, communism and capitalism. Such kind of conditions created the foundation for the monster called Russian industrial. Industrial as a philosophy existed in Russia since the early 20th century with the Russian avant-garde. You'll see it if you listen to Symphony of Industrial Horns from 1922 by the Russian composer Arseny Avraamov. As a music genre, industrial was established approximately in the late 80s or early 90s. One of the first Russian industrial artists was Alexander Lebedev-Frontov. He was a painter, musician, and a political activist who was the member of the National Bolshevist Party in the 1990s. Since the late 90s, he released lots of music under the various projects such as Linia Mas, Вепрь суицида, Ветрофония, Стальной пакт, and TAU. If you've got interested but don't know what to start from, I'd recommend you the album Decima Mas / Second Principe Nero from 2002 by his project Стальной пакт. This album is not too long and it's one of the most interesting industrial albums that I've ever heard. Alexander Lebedev-Frontov died from a heart attack in January 8th of 2022 in the age of 61. Another cult figure in the Russian industrial is Alexei Tegin. He is also one of the first people who started playing industrial in Russia. He was one of those who brought the ritualistic vibe into the genre. He was never interested in reflecting on the modern industrial society. Instead, he put authenticity of the ancient Eastern cultures as his main priority. His most famous projects are Purpa and Corpse. I already reviewed Tegin's art in one of my older videos. I'll leave the link in the description if you want to learn more about him and his projects. Two of the most interesting Russian industrial bands from the early period are Six Dead Bulgarians and Noises of Russia. If you enjoy music similar to Soviet France, these two bands will be a great addition to your track list. From albums by Six Dead Bulgarians, you can listen to В бункере не страшно from 1996. From albums by Noises of Russia, you can listen to Live in Volgograd from 2014. If you'd like to listen to some more of the ritual ambient from Russia, you totally need to check out Vishut Hakali. Vishut Hakali is amazing. It's one of my favorite ambient projects. It's a great music for meditating. If you still did not listen to the album Psenadach from 2002, then do it now. What are you waiting for? If you want music about nature with a mysterious vibe, Velial will be great for you. You can check out the album Dyatlov Spas from 2009. This album reminded me a lot of Thomas Körner's music. Roman Sidorov. This deep dive into the Russian underground would be impossible without mentioning Roman Sidorov and other musicians who worked with him. I already made a gigantic review on Roman Sidorov, so I will not talk about him for too long. You better check out my video about him. Link is in the description. Roman Sidorov is one of the most famous Russian industrial artists. During his lifetime, he worked under 5 projects: Bardcore, Fatal, Der Golem, Starucha Mha, and Sedative. Listen to his entire discography to have a full image of his music. You better start from the album Zmet from 1999 by Der Golem. Here are some more of the music projects by the most famous artists who co-worked with Roman: Zubov Sex Shop, Hypnose, and Cisfinitum. Some of the most interesting albums by Roman's colleagues are Хроника пленных from 1999 by Hypnose and Landschaft from 2000 by Cisfinitum. Roman Sidorov had a huge potential that was realized in a lot of great music. Unfortunately, he hung himself in 2003. He was 29 years old. In 2011, Mitya Zubov, the second member of Der Golem and the leader of the projects Zubov Sex Shop and Hypnose, died from the liver cirrhosis and the exhaustion of the organism due to heavy alcoholism. Roman Sidorov and Mitya Zubov were buried in the same graveyard in their hometown, Frязино. As a conclusion for this part of the iceberg, I'd like to tell you a story about how foreign music was smuggled to USSR. Because of the Iron Curtain that did not allow most of the stuff from abroad, it was very hard to find some foreign music in the shops. That's why some of it was smuggled and sold under the noses of the Soviet government. It was also very expensive to make the copies of the foreign vinyl. Because of that, the smugglers used old X-ray pictures from the hospitals and recorded music on them. These DIY X-ray copies were called the bones. Obviously, the quality of the sound from the bones was terrible, but for the Soviet people it was better than nothing. Needless to say that those who were caught producing and selling those bones were arrested and got into serious trouble with the government. Bottom. Here I'll mention some of the most interesting musicians in the Russian underground scene. End is one of my favorite depressive black metal projects. It was founded by Roman Lamovsky in 2012. Under this project, Roman recorded a lot of material, but only one album was released in 2013. The album was called Between Light and Lies. Russian black metal scene is not the most famous one. This is why Between Light and Lies might be overlooked by many. Despite that, it's one of the most sincere albums in black metal that is worth listening. An End was done after Roman Lamovsky hung himself in the June 1st of 2013. He was 22 years old. The posthumous demo, All of That Pain, was unofficially released by Roman's friend in 2016. The demo contained Roman's unfinished songs. Flesh and Space. Flesh and Space is one of the most unusual gothic music projects that I've ever seen. If you like Soper Aeternus, you'll enjoy Flesh and Space. The influence of the first one on the second one is obvious. Flesh and Space is a mysterious project that was founded by the writer and musician Ivan Gerasimov. According to the information that I found on the internet from the various documents and the interviews, Ivan took the inspiration for his music from communicating to different kinds of spirits. Besides that, his music is also based on the depressive experiences that he had, such as drug usage and the problems in his personal life. There is the information on the internet that no one wants to release music by Flesh and Space officially because of the bad reputation. There were some rumors that some people who listened to Flesh and Space for too long committed suicide. Some of those people wrote letters to Ivan to let him know about it. Strange fact that literally all of those letters went from the same address, what debunks those creepy rumors about Flesh and Space. Despite that, Flesh and Space is a project with its own depressive aura that might scare an unprepared listener. The only confirmed suicide related to Flesh and Space's music is the one committed by the former guitarist who helped Ivan with his most famous album, From, that was released in 2002. This album is awesome. It's one of the darkest albums that I've heard. I read the article by Ivan about how he made it. There he told about experiencing contacts with spirits, using drugs, and his personal problems. This album is creepy, melodic and melancholic. It contains my favorite song by Flesh and Space, which is called The Deserted Dreams. It is also his most popular song. If you feel depressed and you want similar music for your mood, then you need From. Dvar. Dvar is literally one of a kind. One of the first things that makes it so special is that they are making music in a made-up language. Some people say that their lyrics are in Enochian language, which is considered literally the language of angels. The members of Dvar are anonymous, and there is only one photo of them on the internet. They never perform their music and give interviews, only via email. According to them, all of the ideas are sent to them by their being, which is called Dvar. The members are considering themselves mediums that are spreading Dvar's message. In the beginning, their music was very dark and used a lot of demonic imagery. Later, their music became the exact opposite. They started working in the light wave genre, which is very kind and positive. They started using bees as the mascot. Their most famous album is their debut, which is called Pira and was released in 2002. It also contains the band's most famous song, Tai Lira. According to the rumors that were spread by some people, everyone who listened to Dvar started becoming addicted to their music and already couldn't live without it. When I learned about Dvar, I was very intrigued. Their music made me feel different kinds of emotions. I've never seen a band like Dvar in my life. I listened to their debut album Pira and was very impressed. This album is an absolute masterpiece. I don't consider Dvar a scary band. Surprisingly, their music was always calming to me. Whether their early dark works or their later light works, it's always a lot of fun listening to Dvar. Abyss. Aho. Before making this video, I already knew who I should put in the darkest part of the iceberg. Aho definitely deserved it. It's one of the darkest music projects that I've ever heard. Music by Aho I find truly unsettling. There is very little information about the person behind Aho. There is the information that he was a transvestite who sometimes referred to himself as he and sometimes as she. There is little to none of the information about him. Aho is a peculiar dark wave project. His most known albums are Bihek and Gang. Both were recorded in 2008. This music is unsettling and wonderful in its own way. Aho died in 2008. The cause of death is unknown. Some people say he got drowned. Others say he got murdered. People will never find out for sure. The truth behind who Aho really was and what his music was about will always remain the mystery in the darkest corners of the Russian underground and will never come to the surface. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, press like, subscribe and leave a comment to help my channel grow. You can also support it by buying my music on Bandcamp. All links will be in the description below. Don't forget to press the bell of Satan to don't miss the new videos. Farewell, stay out of hell.